With My Hero Academia entering its final years, One Piece having an ending on the horizon, and Jujutsu Kaisen's author saying that the series only has 2 more years, it's clear that Weekly Shonen Jump is in desperate need for its next hit. And while Jump has had some big hits such as Demon Slayer or The Promised Neverland in the past few years, it still feels like the end of the big 3 have been an albatross around the neck of the magazine for quite some time. In an attempt to combat this, Weekly Shonen Jump has launched quite a few number of new series in the past few months. In particular, they spent the beginning of 2021 launching 4 new manga in the span of 1 month: Elusive Samurai, ITLC, Witch Watch, and 9 Dragons Ball Parade. So are any of these series going to be the boost that Shonen Jump needs? Well, in this video, I'm going to be giving my thoughts on all of them as well as ranking them from weakest to strongest, starting with the detective manga ITLC. Initially, ITLC seems to be the story of Sakan and his newbie detective brother Ukan Fudosuki. At the beginning of the story, they are hot on the trail of a mysterious stalker who seems to be following different celebrities. They talk to Atsushi Tagame, a popular actor who seems to be the victim of stalking. After speaking to the detectives, he once again seems to become the victim to these stalkings. He is soon approached by yet another detective, Risa Aoi, who also inquires about the stalking. Soon enough, Risa reveals herself to actually be the stalker. In yet another twist, Risa reveals to Atsushi Tagame that she is actually the detective and suspects him of being the murderer. This is where the central gimmick of ITLC starts to reveal itself. Rika continues to reveal that she planted multiple traps, including a fake watch and a fake receipt and a fake... Okay, just go read the chapter if you actually want to understand how they solved the murder. Anyway, Rika did all this not just because she wants to put Atsushi behind bars, but because she has an insatiable lust for criminals. She was actually trying to prove to herself that he was the real criminal all along to satisfy her insatiable lust for the lawless. And this is how ITLC works. Rika falls madly in love with a criminal, proves that they are the criminal, then goes full yandere and stalks them to the end of the earth until they have no choice but to just turn themselves in to get rid of her. Now, putting aside the plot gimmick of the series, ITLC was simply not enjoyable for me. Don't get me wrong, I'm a fan of the typical detective stuff such as Ace Attorney or Detective Conan, but the problem with ITLC is that the writing is so goddamn convoluted that I found myself having to constantly flip backwards to try and parse exactly what had just happened. The mangaka clearly wants to spend much more time on the falling in love aspect of the story as opposed to, well, the case, that it just drowns out all the actual mystery of the arc. The bickering of the rest of the detectives is extremely standard and adds very little to the actual substance of the story. They don't agree with their methods, they want to be normal detectives, yada yada yada, we've seen this all before. Regardless, the aspect of the story that keeps me from being optimistic about ITLC's future is Rika's entire character. Having a central gimmick is pretty important to separating a detective or mystery series from the competition. The problem with Rika's character is that there really isn't that much that can be done with this. Sure, they can explore why she falls in love with criminals, but the actual act of her going yandere doesn't really change how the cases are going to end up going. Consider the fake story of Detective Trap outlined in Bakuman. In this conceptual story, the main character has no problem with fabricating evidence, faking his identity, and all sorts of other ethical violations to try and trap the subject into revealing their crime. The problem with ITLC is that Rika falling in love with the criminal doesn't really change her approach to solving the case. She's still solving the case in a pretty standard way, but acts absolutely insufferable while she does it. So for those reasons, ITLC gets the bottom spot for me. In third place, we have the superpower comedy manga Witch Watch. Witch Watch stars Morihito, a somewhat mild-mannered high schooler who has a secret. He's secretly a descendant of ogres and possesses incredible ogre strength. His childhood friend is Nico, a young witch who left her hometown to the Holy Land to train to become a witch. One day, Morihito's dad informs him that he's been assigned to become Nico's animal familiar. Wait, so this is a world in which certain races of people are deemed animals and can become servants of witches. Moving on. Anyway, Nico comes back from her training completely enamored with how hot Morihito has become. At the end, Morihito's dad reveals that a prophecy has predicted doom for Nico, which sets up the underlying conflict for the series. Witch Watch is the series that I have the least amount of thoughts about. To me, it seems like a pretty standard superpower gag manga similar to Saki K, and that's okay. Overall, I really like the dynamic between Nico and Morihito. It's really nice not to have some annoying tsundere rom-com duo or some gigantic harem for the MC, so the change of pace is certainly welcome. But for the most part, these types of series are designed to be filler for the magazine and don't tend to last very long, and again, that's okay. It's difficult to find a lot more to talk about because if you've watched one superpower gag manga, you've really read them all. So I'll be giving this one the number 3 spot and moving on. At number 2, we have the historical manga Elusive Samurai. Elusive Samurai by Yasui Matsui, creator of Assassination Classroom, is actually a historical manga, a surprise for a magazine like Shonen Jump. The main character is Hojo Takayuki, young heir to the shogunate of the Hojo samurai clan. To the frustration of his clan, his only skill really seems to be running away. The hero of the clan is the powerful and charismatic Ashikaga Takuji. However, everything falls apart when Ashikaga betrays the clan by aligning himself with a rival warlord, killing Hojo's entire village. From there is where the story takes off, with Hojo having to not only survive but escape the forces of Ashikaga, who seeks to wipe out his clan for good. There is absolutely no doubt that Elusive Samurai is totally stunning in terms of its artwork, especially for a weekly series. I already thought that Yasui Matsui's art style was beautiful and in the absolute top tier of Shonen Jump. Assassination Classroom, in my view, was a bit limiting for Yasui, but Elusive Samurai is finally giving him time to shine. I mean, just take a look at this panel where Ashikaga does the deed and tell me you would have guessed that this was in a weekly shonen book. Yasui has a wonderful knack for being able to draw characters in a cartoonish style, but quickly shift over to something far more serious when the situation calls for it. But you need far more than fantastic artwork to survive in Shonen Jump. And unfortunately, I don't really think that Elusive Samurai is a series that fits all too well here. The entire story is quite literally pulled from a Japanese history book, which ironically means it's probably going to end up being limited by its need to stay accurate. Yasui puts in a great attempt to try and add an amount of shonen flair to the characters. And again, his art style almost makes you feel like you're reading an actual shonen manga. But without these sort of tropes, every battle ends up feeling like the same sword fighting scene done with different characters and different environments over and over again. Overall, I think that Elusive Samurai is the best attempt that you could give to try and tell a more down-to-earth historical tale, at least to this kind of audience. While I definitely think it deserves some recognition, I have a feeling it's going to end up being a commercial flop, which is a shame given the talents of the author. Because of how beautiful it looks, I give it the number 2 spot. And with that, let's move on to my number 1 pick, which is going to be the baseball manga, 9 Dragons Ball Parade. Tamao Azukita is an aspiring baseball player. In particular, he aspires to be a member of Hakuo Gakuin, the greatest high school in all of Japan. Being small in stature and coming from a fairly mediocre middle school, he trains his mind and body to be the best possible catcher to get accepted into the school. In particular, he seeks to overcome his inability to assert himself. At the tryouts, he meets Tao Ryodo, a mysterious pitcher who reveals himself to have an elite level throw. When the baseball portion of the tryouts come around, Azu begins to choke. Ryodo offers to team up with Azu to combine their abilities to dominate the competition. If you don't want to get spoiled, go ahead and skip to the end here. In a twist, despite showing nearly perfect analytical abilities as a pitcher, he fails to make the team. The Hakuo coach reveals that the team is a gigantic team of analysts, having no need for someone with Azu's mind. Ryodo makes the team but declines the invitation to instead create a team with Azu. The first thing that really sticks out to me about 9 Dragons Ball Parade is the, shonenness of it that makes it enjoyable for me who doesn't give, 2 baseballs about baseball. I feel like sports manga typically have a slider between realism and enjoyment, with each being a trade-off of the other. In the case of Ball Parade, I think it's definitely closer to the anime end of things rather than realistic sports. But in this case, it's just barely on the edge where the baseball is realistic enough to not be off-putting. Second, the dynamic between Azu and Ryodo is something that has definitely been done before. Hinata and Kageyama come to mind. It's been done so much for a good reason. 2 people with vastly different personalities that boost each other's characteristics is a catalyst for an enjoyable narrative. They both have abilities that feed off of each other and establish a central gimmick that hooks your interest. Third, Azu being a primarily strategic character rather than a physical one sets up the potential for the individual baseball games being full of good old-fashioned mind games and psychological elements, rather than just the usual hitting the baseball harder with the power of friendship. It reminds me quite a bit of One Out, which is the only other baseball manga I really enjoy. So overall, I think Shonen Jump is really trying its hardest to find its next long-term hit, with MHA, Jujutsu Kaisen, and others seeing their end on the horizon. Now, this video may have come off as being really negative, but it's not easy to find a Shonen Jump hit. If you've ever read Bakuman, you know just how difficult it is to satisfy the readers of Weekly Shonen Jump. Now, the first 3 I think are going to end up being really niche titles if they even make it past a couple dozen chapters. I do think 9 Dragons Ball Parade has the potential to be a really big hit if it can keep up the energy. And if you want to see me keep up this energy, be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can know when the next video comes out. Hope you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.